Well, reactions are trailing the appointment of principal officers for the red and the green chambers by the leadership of the recently inaugurated 10th National Assembly. That appointment has caused a stir in both the camps of the all ruling progressive, the ruling All Progressives Congress and the minority parties in the Assembly. It has resulted in some subtle open protests by members and party chieftains. While in Imo State, reactions are trailing the position of a 54 million naira levy by the Imo State government on opposition governorship candidates participating in the November governorship election. Some observers describe the move as a deliberate attempt aiming to sabotage the campaign activities of opposition candidates. The Coalition for Political Parties presented a document to journalists revealing that the Imo State government actually required opposition candidates to pay a whopping sum of 54 million naira to participate in the governorship campaigns. And stakeholders in that state are asking Governor Hope Uzodinma to reverse the policy. Quite a bit of, potpourri of issues on this happening in the polity as some states gear up for the coming elections. But first, let's quickly get some analysis here in the studio as I'm not being joined by Dr. Sam Amadi. Good to see you, Dr. Amadi. And quite a moment for a lot of people. By the way, we're still hoping to hear from the APC and the leadership of the party to speak towards perhaps yesterday we had Chief Body George who spoke about the move of the that he's making, as well as other leadership of the PDP to see that they resolve these issues. But it looks as if the APC is about to have its own bit of trouble.
Well, of course, it's had it before the primary. Again, the nature of parties in Nigeria, especially the major parties, even when the minor parties become major, you see that happen with the Labour Party, is that there's an inbuilt, there seems to be an inbuilt pressure for crisis. And that arises because of the nature of the politics. It's too transactional. And again, because the payout of office holding is massive in terms of economic payout, the fight for access becomes unbridled and again unregulated, even when the parties have rules. So we saw even the APC build up with the ouster of Adam Oshiomhole as chairman in a very unusual manner. And again, even the governor of Yobe, who arguably illegally doubled as both chairman and governor at the same time, all because politics necessitated that kind of abnormal arrangement. And then again, during the build-up to even when the current chairman emerged, he emerged in an atmosphere of seemingly endless, brickbats going back and forth, trying to craft a compromise. So rules do not regulate. The rules are not sticky, they don't regulate. And so transactions are endless. And what you get when you have too many transactions and less rule is that all bargain is variable. They are fragile. So the bargain is struck last year to get a chairman may not be strong enough to hold after the election. And so we are seeing now that the president of the APC candidate and now the president didn't receive the support of some base. So you're going to have factions. In politics, it's necessary. I mean, the great American political text, the Federalists argued clearly that to minimize faction, you have to find a way to create a sense in which none of the factions will be strong enough to pull it away. So factions checkmate themselves. But the problem is that when factions do not follow rules, then endless attempt to gain advantage. So now that we have a president, we have the party, you expect some level of solidity and coherence. But now the first touch on the ground, the first reality check, the appointment of principal officers, you are back to what looks like a maximalist attack against each other. So what happened in APC is if PDP won this election, assuming PDP won and Atiku Abubakar was installed, then the two wings of the Wike group and that group, you begin to see that maybe you will see a shift. Some persons will probably want to solidify their power.
So in other words, you're saying, sorry to cut you there, you're saying even if the election had gone the PDP way, there still would have been some kind of bickering.
Yes, because the nature of the politics is too transactional, and the rules are informal and incoherent. So nobody really follows the rules as such. For example, how do we decide principal officers? So we're going to have the caucus. Who are the caucus members? They go through a process. We have a consensus, and that's done. So you have less disposition to acrimony. But the nature of this politics is that maybe this triumphant faction decides and goes against maybe convention, rules, protocols, and do not defer to the order. So sitting back now and watch what's going on, it also builds back to the nature of APC. APC 1.2015 with what looks like contraption, effectively deployed because of PDP's own very bad state then. They won. But throughout the 8 years of President Buhari, we didn't see some kind of, merging in the real sense of a party with defined process. They never even had the BOT put in place all through that period, until the convention. They never even had a convention. So when a party is run without those kind of cementing, ingredients and processes that create a unified political party, the factions built around powerful individuals, CPC, the ACN group and all that, and the old AMP groups, those factions re-emerge even after 8 years period. And again, because President Buhari did not do a lot of politics in terms of building political movement, political party structure, governed, and just basically kept an eye on political development, that's why you still have the party as it was, not fully integrated.
So in other words, when you say not fully integrated, there's still some flakes of the CPC arm and perhaps the old ACN, perhaps causing some kind of friction within the party.
Absolutely. Again, the personnel some of the personnel may change. I mean, some of the people, by the way, are people like the Senate President were PDP up until after the 2015 election, and maybe so they were not part of that contraption. But again, as people enter the side, they get where they belong to. The central figures around this, the PDP has been Tinubu himself as a leader of the party and his own tendencies. And the run up to the primary, we saw that the party also had tendencies, and one tendency overwhelmed. And now in governing, we are seeing also some pushback. It's obvious that the chairman may not have a very strong base, so it looks like. But again, it remains a point of convergence for those who may not find good seat in the new arrangement. The thing about power attracts and repels. By the time everybody crowds to the power and power does not accommodate everybody, they will find alternative places to hang themselves, and they will find a chairman who probably is not happy with the way things are going and who seem not to align properly with the direction, may become a point to build the coalitions or the discontents, which may now create something close to what we had in the last 8 years.
Speaking of which, there's contentment now. Do you feel or see the hangover of the primaries of the ruling party at play here?
It's obviously it's at play. And again, the difficult mechanics of constructing a governing elite. So for example, Tinubu won an election, so Southern Muslim. The vice president is Muslim, Northern, Northeast Muslim. And then the question around who should be the Senate president. Now, in some conception of balance of power, so people would say the big job is the presidency. The next big job is the Senate president, because essentially, under a constitutional democracy, the vice president tags along with the president. Doesn't have too much independence, because Section 5 says executive power is in the president, who may exercise it by himself, or the VP. So the VP is like appendage, even though it's a powerful office. So some people will reason that maybe we should get this other big job. But because of the demographics, the composition, the ethnic religious configuration of that presidency, then it couldn't go that way. So it creates also an inconvenience to some power configuration. That further builds back to the issue around the post-primary, the pre-primary contentions. So you have Tinubu's men here, there, and other persons maybe not getting what they consider fair deal. Now, what happens in politics really is depending on the character of the characters who are involved, depending on momentum, and depending on events, these small issues, this storm in the tea bag, the teacup, could conflagrate and become major issues. So that's really, it may or may not depend on the characters involved.
I want us to dwell on the character. You spoke of one, which is former president of the country, President Buhari. You said he was aloof, he didn't play politics. Now that we're here with a new president, and some have called him one of the best political strategists on the continent, and we've seen him started making some kind of move, incursion, reception, across political divide. What do you think that may mean for his own party first, before we now see if that can actually transcend into winning some kind of support from other political parties?
First, I think he will build a stronger APC. I mean, in terms of trying to drag everybody to a defined direction because of his own political pedigree. I mean, in politics, we have a symmetry of competence, skills, resources, incentive. We might all be smart guys, but you may not have the incentive to give you, every time there's opportunity cost for every effort and time. So some people put their time in politics because they have incentive to lord over others, to play the game. So Tinubu has shown and has developed the resources, the skill sets to play politics. And so he has been largely successful. So I think he would build a stronger APC in the sense in which he's going to bring more people to the orbit. They're not going to all be at the center of power. Power is a limited resource. So if you have more, somebody's going to have less, except you're creative to diversify power and create power from non-power. But again, the problem is he's going to be successful because he's going to attract, he can do the deal. So he is reputed as a deal maker. And in politics, especially traditional politics, deal making seems endless. He can cut the pie in different forms and keep cutting them. But one reality check would be that sometimes the events that would trigger a resentment, a pushback, might not be foreseeable. A black swan somewhere, something happens. And then unscripted. Now, those events will radicalize some centers of disenchantment. Again, people are going to lose out in political sharing. When you are a game master, a deal maker, one of the risks is that because they are not principled, the interventions are not principled, they are basically based on deals. It might be difficult to really say win-win, but win-win is conceptually endless, but in reality, win-win is endless. You can't create win-win for everybody. For example, I want to be Senate President, you want to be Senate President, you want to be Senate President. There's no win-win. There's a win-lose. And when your approach is not principled, like say, okay, fine, you know what, it should be zoned to X, then you create a sense also that people who lose in that deal making become embittered. And then they become centers for pushback. And then when the unscripted event happens, then those who suddenly, you see that center that's small, kind of grows. So whereas Tinubu has the capacity to bring most of the APC people together to sell, unlike Buhari, who didn't have the energy, the competence, and the mental resources, by the way, to focus on politicking, because that requires people's skill, emotional intelligence, some attunement to people and situations, and therefore you're able to engineer and craft bargains that everybody either accepts or forced to accept. So he has better skill set, but again, he has got that strength could create a problem for him going forward.
Let's talk about this, and it's not about the black swan. It's about what people already see and smell. The presidency, as it is now, is already causing some kind of ripples, in some of the quarters, specifically within the party in some states and outside the party, also in some states, notably Rivers State, where people are already saying perhaps Nyesom Wike must or should make his cabinet. And in Kano State, Ganduje is, having the heat of his political life as the NNPP is trying all out to see that he answers to some of those questions that many people had asked while he was there as governor. Now, expatiate for us, what do you think will ultimately happen with all of this, and people also speaking in the political space that the president should look towards some of these key allies, irrespective of their political leanings?
Absolutely. See, now, this is where a less politically astute president would do better constituting his cabinet. He has, there's something about clarity, simplicity. So I'm going to choose technocrats, guys who can get the job done. So A, B, C, D, boom, it's easy for me. Or I'm going to choose loyalty. Guys, Buhari perhaps says, look, I'm going to choose people I know, loyalty, okay? It's easier for you. Or I'm going to choose those who worked for the campaign. This is reward time. So when you have a clear statement of intent and what you want to do, it's easier. But for assure you, when you're doing political mastery, you want to master the political environment, things shift too fast. So take, for example, Kano.
Yeah.
Ganduje was with you, has been with you, is with you. Again, Ganduje is a force. But again, as things are today, Kwakwanso defeated him, has the governor, has most of the legislators, and now has come back to you. So you're going to be struggling. It's zero sum. They seem to be, irreconcilable. Are you going to give it to the guy who is your friend, who is your trusted ally, who stayed with you all along, but who is now diminishing in terms of clout? Because he's ex-governor, he's not in control of his seat of power.
I hope you don't lose your train of thoughts. I'll come back to you. Domination. That's where we'll continue when we come back. While you're watching Arise Prime Time, plenty more still ahead. We're looking at the political calculations as the two big parties are enmeshed in some squabbles. Join us again. Welcome back to Arise Prime Time, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day with me, Sulaiman Aled. And today, my guest, Sam Amadi, and I will talking about some of these squabbles in some of the major political parties and even in the opposition. We were looking at Kano before we went on that short moment. And you did say that for some people whose politically, relevance are diminishing, it will be a tough one for them. Now, let's wrap up on Kano, where Kwakwanso is seem to be making a big, audacious presence in the Tinubu, getting Tinubu's attention more than Ganduje. So
Absolutely.
speak to us on that.
Don't forget that Tinubu has, the biggest concern Tinubu has is the tribunal. The tribunal could go either way. And if he goes to a rerun, he needs Kwakwanso, he needs Kano, big time. This is a president who didn't win Kano, didn't win Lagos, didn't win Rivers State, or one Rivers State marginally, and didn't win most of the metropolitan parts. So he would like to have a better showing. So he needs Kwakwanso. At the same time, he has a fondness for Ganduje, whose relevance is diminished because once a former governor does not control his state, and he's not even a legislator, and didn't put many of his boys into that office, Kwakwanso is the guy who has the ground in Kano, and the president will be torn. Now, if you go to Rivers, it's easier politically in terms of the fact that Wike, who is a PDP, controls Rivers. But again, you have to look at Wike's profile, reliability, trustworthiness. You got to look also his foot soldiers on the ground, especially people like Magnus Abe and others who have been with the party. Because he has an eye both on now and 2020 and the next election, of course, also keeping the party together. So the decisions to make is not an easy one for politically minded person. Yeah. It's easier for people who are minded on governance. And when you have too many IOUs, and then sometimes it can't square the circle. It's difficult. There'll be losers and winners. And the problem with losers and winners in politics, when it's not principled, is that you create additional motivation for losers to probably hit back because they see it as, arbitrary, they read it as mischief. But if it's a principle sorting out, look, with criteria for choosing, in the previous PDP government, it was clear, the party leadership at the state sends 3 names, to the president. The president, so caucus sits, and the president chooses out of the 3. So it's a little bit manageable process because the expectations are clear. If your party does not field you, it will take strange event for the president to pick you. But here it's uncharted. There's no procedure for who could make that cabinet. And the president has to struggle between his competence, loyalty, and then political capital. And oftentimes, you like I said, it's like squaring a circle. There will be losses, there will be mistakes, and how you play out towards, in the long term determines his political future. It determines the quality of governance in the first instance. It determines also his capacity to manage politics. He did well in Lagos managing politics for all the over 21 years in and out of office, but the national politics is more complicated. There are many people who have similar demands. There's no one godfather, but his associates think he could replicate Lagos in the bigger scale.
Let me quickly, before you leave, let me quickly get your sense of what's happening. We have three big elections coming up this year: Imo, Bayelsa, and Kogi. But Imo seemed to be in the news, and not for too good a reason, speaking of which candidates are being asked to bring a whopping 54 million naira for you to embark on your campaign, billboard, and so many other things wise, which oppositions are already kicking. So what's your reading of that?
First, politically, I think it shows the governor is frightened. I mean, this is basically designed to dampen campaigns, especially the parties are not established, not PDP, maybe the APC, parties like AA, where General Ogunewe looks like a strong candidate. Again, this is unconstitutional. Rivers tried it, but people forget. Read the Electoral Act of the Constitution. Campaigns, including billboards, everything, is INEC to regulate. State governments have no authority, constitutional authority to regulate campaigns. You can regulate advertising for commercial, but once it's elections, it's an INEC responsibility under the Constitution and the Electoral Act. So this is actually unconstitutional, and I think they should go to court. I've asked some of the smaller parties that I'm willing to help them, because we have to, apart from the constitutionality, this is actually undermining democracy. The presumption of democracy is that there's competition, and competition means access to the basics for politicking. So if you say 56 million, by the way, if you look at the Electoral Act and the campaign finance regulation, 56 million is even almost getting to what is required for you to campaign fully for some offices. So why would you ask for politicians in an economy that is like this? This is absolutely monetizing the campaign. And again, this is a state governor standing election, so he wouldn't pay, because that's a state. The money goes to the state, and we don't know of any transparency they have in Imo or elsewhere. So this is saying, you guys, if you want to even campaign, bring 54 million, and by so doing, you have even cut down on the campaign fund for smaller parties that need to make this election competitive. So I think as a matter of national policy, the National Assembly should be very clear and outlaw those. Those are very secret manner of undermining political competition. And there should be a law regulating campaigns and how states can regulate. And again, the Electoral Act makes it clear only INEC has the capacity to regulate political campaigns.
Dr. Sam Amadi, many thanks for your time.
Thanks.